Hand over the $40,000 to your sister or the wedding's canceled. My mom exploded at me during our engagement celebration. I refused. She hit me so hard I crashed into the wall. Then my fiancé's father stepped in, and what he said wiped the smug smile right off her face. I, 28M, never thought my engagement party would turn into a battlefield, but here we are. The whole mess started 3 months ago when I proposed to Sarah, and what should have been the happiest time of my life became a nightmare orchestrated by my own mother. Let me back up. I work in tech, make decent money, and have been saving for years to buy a house. $40,000 sat in my savings account, money I'd scraped together through overtime, side projects, and living like a monk for 3 years. Sarah knew about it, her family knew about it, and unfortunately, so did mine. My sister had always been the golden child. While I worked through college and paid my own way, she partied through a communications degree that my parents funded entirely. After graduation, she bounced between jobs, never lasting more than 6 months anywhere. Now at 25, she was living back home, unemployed, and had racked up massive credit card debt from her shopping addiction. The engagement party was supposed to be intimate, just immediate family at Sarah's parents' house. Her father had insisted on hosting, and I was grateful because my family's financial situation was complicated. Sarah's family owned a successful accounting firm, lived in a beautiful suburban home, and had always treated me like their own son. Everything started normally. Sarah looked stunning in her blue dress, and I felt like the luckiest guy alive. Her parents had decorated their backyard with string lights, and the whole evening felt magical. Then my mother pulled me aside. She told me we needed to talk privately, and her tone immediately put me on edge. We stepped into the kitchen, away from the other guests, and that's when she dropped the bomb. She demanded I give my sister the $40,000 to pay off her debts and help her get back on her feet. I stared at her in disbelief. That money represented years of sacrifice, my future with Sarah, our down payment on a home. I told her absolutely not, that the money was for my house, for my future. Her face twisted with rage. She screamed that family comes first, that my sister needed help, and that I was being selfish. She said I could always save more money, but my sister was drowning in debt and needed immediate help. I stood my ground. I explained that I'd worked myself to exhaustion for that money, that Sarah and I had plans, that my sister's problems weren't my responsibility. I reminded her that my sister had created this mess through her own poor choices. That's when she completely lost it. She yelled that if I didn't hand over the money immediately, she would make sure the wedding never happened. She threatened to tell Sarah's family embarrassing stories about me, to cause drama, to ruin everything. I told her she was being ridiculous and started to walk away. That's when she grabbed my arm and spun me around. Her face was red with fury as she screamed that I was an ungrateful son who didn't care about family. I pulled my arm free and told her the conversation was over. I said I was going back to my engagement party and that she could either behave like a civilized person or leave. She followed me toward the door, still yelling, and that's when everyone in the backyard could hear her. Sarah's parents, her siblings, our other relatives, everyone stopped talking and stared as my mother continued her tirade about the money. I felt humiliated. This was supposed to be our special night, and she was destroying it. I turned around one more time and firmly told her to stop, that she was embarrassing herself and ruining our celebration. That's when she hit me. It wasn't a slap. It was a full-force punch to my chest that sent me stumbling backward. I lost my balance and crashed into the kitchen wall, knocking over a decorative shelf. The sound of breaking glass mixed with gasps from the doorway where other guests had gathered. For a moment, nobody moved. I stood there, stunned, my back aching from hitting the wall. My mother stood over me, her fists still clenched, breathing heavily like she wanted to hit me again. Then Sarah's father stepped forward. I'd always respected him. He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who chose his words carefully. He'd built his business from nothing, raised 4 successful children, and had always treated me with kindness and respect. But the look on his face as he approached my mother was unlike anything I'd ever seen. He positioned himself between us and looked directly at my mother. His voice was calm, but carried an authority that made everyone in the room freeze. He told her that she had just assaulted his future son-in-law in his home, in front of his family, during what should have been a celebration. My mother started to interrupt, but he held up his hand. He continued, explaining that he'd heard every word of her demands about the money, her threats about the wedding, and her complete disrespect for me and my choices. He said that in his 40 years of business, he'd dealt with all kinds of people, but he'd never seen a parent try to financially manipulate their child and then resort to violence when they didn't get their way. My mother's face went pale. She tried to defend herself, claiming she was just trying to help her daughter, that I was being unreasonable. Sarah's father wasn't having it. He told her that her daughter's financial problems were not my responsibility, that I had every right to use my own money as I saw fit, and that her behavior was absolutely unacceptable. Then he said something that made my mother's smug expression completely disappear. He told her that he was going to make sure I never had to worry about money for the wedding or the house. He said that any parent who would physically attack their child over money didn't deserve to have that child struggle financially. He announced that he was going to cover our entire wedding and help with our down payment as an early wedding gift. My mother's jaw dropped. She stammered that he couldn't do that it wasn't his place. He smiled coldly and told her that it absolutely was his place. He said that when someone attacks his family, and I was his family now, he protects them. He added that she was no longer welcome in his home and that if she ever laid a hand on me again, he would press charges for assault. The room was dead silent. My mother looked around desperately, probably expecting someone to support her, but everyone was staring at her with disgust and shock. Even my father, who had been quiet throughout the whole ordeal, was shaking his head. Sarah appeared at my side, her eyes filled with tears. She asked if I was okay and helped me straighten up. The concern in her voice, the way she immediately came to comfort me, made me realize how lucky I was to have found someone who truly cared about me. My mother tried one last desperate attempt. She told Sarah's father that he didn't understand family dynamics, that siblings should help each other. He cut her off immediately. He said that healthy families don't operate through threats, manipulation, and violence. He told her that what she'd done wasn't about family. It was about control and entitlement. Then he delivered the final blow. He said that based on what he'd witnessed, he was questioning whether my mother should even be invited to the wedding. He told her that any future relationship with me and Sarah would depend entirely on her ability to apologize sincerely and change her behavior completely. My mother's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, humiliation, and finally something that might have been fear. She realized that her actions had consequences she hadn't anticipated. She looked at me one more time, and I could see her calculating whether to apologize or double down. I stared back at her, my chest still aching from where she'd hit me, and I felt something shift inside me. The fear and obligation I'd always felt toward her was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. She must have seen it in my eyes because she suddenly deflated. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and left, my father trailing behind her after offering me a quiet apology. Update 1. The next few days were surreal. Sarah's family rallied around me in ways I never expected. Her mother brought me homemade soup and kept checking on my back, where I'd hit the wall. Her siblings called to make sure I was okay and to express their outrage at what had happened. Sarah herself was incredible. She never once suggested that maybe I should have just given my mother the money to avoid the drama. Instead, she held me while I processed the shock of being physically attacked by my own parent. My mother tried calling me repeatedly, but I wasn't ready to talk. The voicemail started apologetic but quickly turned accusatory again. She blamed Sarah's family for interfering, claimed I was being manipulated, and insisted that everything would have been fine if I'd just helped my sister. My sister finally called me directly. She was mortified when she learned what had happened. She told me she'd never asked our mother to demand money from me, that she was trying to handle her debt problems on her own. She apologized for being the catalyst for the whole mess and promised she was looking into debt consolidation and had started job hunting seriously. That conversation helped. At least I knew my sister wasn't behind the manipulation, even if she had created the original problem through her spending. Update 2. 2 weeks after the engagement party, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I almost didn't let her in, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear what she had to say. She looked terrible, like she hadn't been sleeping. She sat on my couch and tried to explain herself. She said she'd been stressed about my sister's situation, worried about her future, and had convinced herself that I was the only one who could help. I listened without interrupting as she described the pressure she felt as a mother to fix her children's problems. She admitted that threatening to ruin my wedding was wrong, that hitting me was unforgivable, and that she'd let her desperation cloud her judgment. But then she said something that made me realize she still didn't get it. She asked if we could work something out about the money, maybe a smaller amount, just to help my sister get started. I told her no. I explained that this wasn't about the amount of money. It was about respect, boundaries, and the fact that she'd physically attacked me when I didn't comply with her demands. I said that until she could accept that my money was mine to do with as I pleased, and that violence was never acceptable, we couldn't have a relationship. She left upset, but I felt relieved. I'd stood my ground without yelling or getting emotional. I'd stated my boundaries clearly, and now it was up to her whether she could respect them. Update 3. The wedding planning became a joy instead of a stress thanks to Sarah's father's generosity. We found a perfect venue. Sarah found her dream dress, and everything was falling into place. More importantly, I felt supported and valued in ways I'd never experienced with my own family. 3 months before the wedding, my mother reached out again. This time, she'd clearly done some thinking. She apologized without conditions, acknowledged that her behavior was abusive, and said she understood why I'd cut contact. She didn't mention the money at all. She asked if there was any way she could earn back my trust and be part of my wedding day. She said she'd been seeing a counselor to work on her issues with control and manipulation. I was skeptical but agreed to meet with her in a public place. She seemed genuinely different, calmer, more self-aware. She admitted that she'd always tried to control her children's lives and that losing me had forced her to confront some uncomfortable truths about herself. We started having supervised visits with Sarah present. My mother was respectful, asked about our lives without making demands, and slowly began rebuilding trust. The wedding day was perfect. My mother attended and behaved appropriately, though I could tell she was walking on eggshells. Sarah's father walked her down the aisle since her own father had passed away years earlier, and in his speech, he welcomed me to the family as the son he'd always wanted. During the reception, Sarah's father pulled me aside. He told me he was proud of how I'd handled the whole situation, that standing up to family takes real courage. He said that watching me refuse to be manipulated had convinced him that I was the right man for his daughter. As for the money, we used it exactly as planned, as a down payment on our first house. My sister got her life together on her own, found a good job, and is slowly paying off her debts. She's actually become closer to me since the incident, probably because she saw how toxic our mother's manipulation could be. My relationship with my mother is still rebuilding. She's in therapy, respects my boundaries, and has never again tried to tell me what to do with my money or my life. It's not the relationship we had before, but it's healthier. Looking back, that terrible night at our engagement party was actually a gift. It showed me who truly had my back, forced me to establish boundaries I should have set years earlier, and brought me closer to the family I chose rather than the one I was born into. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who try to control you the most. Learning to say no to family manipulation was the best thing I ever did for my marriage and my future.